So the Bible is full of lots of examples. We have tons of different kings and all sorts of different leaders in the Bible. So there's a lot of different examples of leadership here. So I'm going to try to keep it narrow here, a little bit light, because I do want to get outside and enjoy the sun. Sorry, but I really do. Just being honest. But we start off with, basically, let's start off with a big change in leadership. And so that'll be in 1 Samuel there, where we go from, basically up until that point in time, the Israelites are being led by God. God was their king. He was leading them. He was their leader. But they were not happy with this. They wanted an actual person who was a king who was leading them. They wanted to be like everybody else. So they came to Samuel. They said, hey, give us a king. Samuel went, talked to God. God told him, all right, go tell them, hey, look, I'm going to take their men. I'm going to take their women. I'm going to take their maidservants. The king's going to take their maidservants. The men, the king's going to take their men, women, the maidservants, men servants, their cattle, 10% of this and that. Take all the stuff, throw them in a war or whatever, and see what they say. And they come back, and so Samuel goes and tells that to the people. And so 1 Samuel chapter 18, verses 19 through 20. Nevertheless, the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel, and they said, no, but we will have a king over us, that we may also be like all the nations, and that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battles. So even though God told them, hey, look, this is what the king's going to do. He's going to do all these things to you. They're like, we still want that. We want to be like everybody else. If you remember from my series last year when I was talking about financial issues and keeping up with the Joneses, they wanted to be just like the Joneses. They wanted to have a king just like the Joneses. What they don't know is everybody who had that king wasn't really too happy about having a king, whatever. Most of those kings back in that day and age, well, let's just say there's a reason why kingdoms don't really exist nowadays. They didn't work out too well for the people in general. There were a lot of revolts when the time came. But they were not wanting that. They wanted a king. And so God relented. He's like, all right, I'll give you a king, whatever. So he set it up for Saul to go run into Samuel. Samuel anointed Saul, made him a king. There was actually a contract that Samuel had filled out and had Saul sign that listed the powers of the king. Because he actually was not an absolute power king. He still had limitations because at the end of the day, God was still the King of Kings.
Yes.
He still was the main king, whatever.
Yes.
He's going to give them this little king here, whatever, but God was still the big king.
Yes.
So they had their king. So now Saul has got a lot of questionable decisions that he makes while he is king. I just want to focus on one that I think represents a lot of his actions. In 1 Samuel chapter 14, verses 24 through 30. And the men of Israel were distressed that day, for Saul had placed the people under oath, saying, cursed is the man who eats any food until evening, before I have taken vengeance on my enemies. So none of the people tasted food. Now all the people of the land came to a forest, and there was honey on the ground. And when the people had come into the woods, there was the honey dripping. But no one put his hand to his mouth, for the people feared the oath. But Jonathan had not heard his father charge the people with the oath. Therefore he stretched out the end of the rod that was in his hand, and dipped it into a honeycomb, and put his hand to his mouth, and his countenance brightened. Then one of the people said, your father strictly charged the people with an oath, saying, cursed is the man who eats food this day. And the people were faint. But Jonathan said, my father has troubled the land. Look now, how my countenance has brightened, because I tasted a little of this honey. How much better if the people had eaten freely today of the spoil of their enemies, which they found. For now would there not have been a much greater slaughter among the Philistines. So Saul is a rash man. He makes a lot of bad decisions. He's very rash. He's quick to anger. He's very rash, whatever. And so at the spur of the moment, he goes and makes this decision. He's like, you know what? My soldiers aren't going to eat for the day. Nobody can eat. So they're going to be out there fighting hard, and they're not going to take any nutritional value and stuff like that, which basically anybody knows means they're going to get fatigued.
Yes.
I do a lot of running. I like to run. I do a fair amount of half marathons. And one of the things is at a certain point, you got to take in some fuel to keep your body going, or else you're not going to be able to finish the race. And here he is. He's expecting his soldiers to go out there and fight this battle and win. And they got no fuel in there. Their tanks are running on empty.
Yes.
Because he did not want to let them eat. He made a rash decision because of his pride, because of his arrogance, and because his desire for vengeance blinding him in his rashness. So Jonathan doesn't know this. He's totally oblivious to this. He goes out there and he initially goes and he gets himself a little honey. He then gets informed, hey, Jonathan, wait a second here, man. Your dad said, that's a no-no, don't eat. And so what could he done? Jonathan could have said, you know what, this is a bad decision. We're not going to follow this. But no, because his father Saul is the king, and that is his king, even though it's a bad decision, he still has to follow it. Because it's not an ungodly order. It's an unwise decision, but it's not ungodly. He didn't ask him to go build a temple to Baal and bow down to some other gods. That's not what he asked. He made a very unwise decision. But unfortunately, as we know, there are people we get put in our lives who are leaders or sometimes bosses. They sometimes make decisions that are not wise. But just because they don't make a wise decision doesn't mean we can just ignore those orders or those decisions that they make. We still have to follow them. If they're ungodly, that's entirely different. Those would be, if you're in the military, those are the illegal orders and stuff like that. But otherwise, it's just, unfortunately, it's a bad decision, as this was here. And Jonathan, being a godly man, he had to follow that unwise decision. He could not go and tell his men, no, we're going to ignore him. We're going to do our own thing here. No. He also had to be a leader. He had to show that by also enforcing that rule too. So eventually, Saul finds out about it. And they cast lots and eventually finds out that Jonathan had, dipped into the honey. And so Saul wants to carry through. Yet again, he wants to carry through. He wants to try to kill his son here. Instead of admitting, oh, man, I made a horrible decision. God, please forgive me. Please lift this, revoke what I've done here. Please, God, forgive me. Forgive what I've done. Forgive my vow that I made here rashly and foolishly. No, he wants to go through carry his son. Jonathan is only saved because everybody else is like, no, dude, he won us the battle, man. You can't go and kill him. He just won us your battle. He was a great warrior out there. He's the reason why we won. And so the men actually saved Jonathan from his own father because of how rash he was. Because he could not sit there and humble himself and admit he made a bad decision. He was rash. He could not admit that. It's a very bad sign in leaders when you cannot admit that. So that's the first king of Israel. So let's go to the second king. Let's see here. Let's see, was the second king any better? Because everybody talks about David being so great or whatever. But was he perfect? Did he make great decisions all the time too? As you all are probably familiar with, there was a young lady, I'm assuming she was young, Bathsheba, who David happened to see from his palace when she was cleansing herself after being unclean. She was taking a bath and he saw her. And, well, he was the king. There's a movie I like from Mel Brooks. It's an old movie. Anything from Mel Brooks is an old movie. But, and it was called The History of the World. And in it, one of the characters is a French king. And the line he likes to say is, it's good to be the king. And much like that here was David's king. It's good to be the king, whatever. He saw a beautiful woman. He called her, whatever, and he took her. Problem is, she got pregnant now. So now there was a baby, and she was married to one of his best warriors, Uriah the Hittite. This was the problem. He summoned Uriah to the palace, out of war, because they were at war this time. He summoned him back from the battlefield, tried to get him to go be with his wife. But the Israelite soldiers had a rule. They were not with their women during wartime. They did not go and sleep with them. So his brothers, his comrades in arms were out there in the field, and so he would not go home to be with his wife. He refused to go do that. So David had a problem here. He could not cover up this pregnancy by saying, oh, yeah, it was just a weird little timing there. Just pregnancy was only 7 months, not 9 months or whatever. No, he couldn't get that because Uriah would not go home and be with his wife. And so, unfortunately, the result of that problem, he had to get rid of him. So he could then take Bathsheba as his own wife. So he ordered his general to basically have Uriah the Hittite killed in battle. He deliberately sent him out to the front line and then ordered the general to remove the troops from him. So basically he was out there by himself and he would get slaughtered by the enemy. And then once that was done, he was then free to go and marry Bathsheba after the period of mourning was over. So, yeah, this is not too kosher. This is not a good decision here for David or whatever. And so in 2 Samuel chapter 12, verses 1 through 13, we have Nathan come here and, break this down for David. Then the Lord sent Nathan to David, and he came to him and said to him, there were 2 men in one city, one rich and the other poor. The rich man had exceedingly many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing except one little ewe lamb, which he had bought and nourished, and it up together with him and with his children. And they ate of his food and drank from his own cup and lay in his bosom. And it was like a daughter to him. And a traveler came to the rich man, who refused to take from his own flock and from his own herd to prepare one for the wayfaring man, who had come to him. But he took the poor man's lamb and prepared it for the man who had come to him. So David's anger was greatly aroused against the man, and he said to Nathan, As the Lord lives, the man who has done this shall surely die, and he shall restore fourfold for the lamb, because he did this thing, and because he had no pity. So David is not happy. This guy, he took the poor guy's only lamb and slaughtered it, whatever, instead of one for his mighty herd. This has got the king very unhappy. He's very angry. He's like, "Arr! I want to punish this dude." And so then Nathan said to David, "You are the man! It's you! You took his lamb! His only lamb! You're the rich dude! You're right, the Hittite was the poor dude!" Thus says the Lord God of Israel, I anointed you king over Israel, and I delivered you from the hand of Saul. I gave you your master's house and your master's wives into your keeping, and gave you the house of Israel and Judah. And if that had been too little, I also would have given you much more. Why have you despised the commandment of the Lord to do evil in his sight? You have killed Uriah the Hittite with the sword. You have taken his wife to be your wife, and have killed him with the sword of the people of Ammon. Now therefore the sword shall never depart from your house, because you have despised me, and have taken the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your wife. Thus says the Lord, Behold, I will raise up adversity against you from your own house, and I will take your wives before your eyes and give them to your neighbor, and he shall lie with your wives in the sight of the sun. For you did it secretly, but I will do this thing before all Israel, before the sun. So Nathan just tells David, you're the dude, you're the one who's done this, and God's pronouncing this punishment against you. So David's the king, though. He could act a lot of different ways, whatever. He could be very mad at Nathan. He could order the guards to chop off his head, throw him in prison, all those things, in modern days he could say, sue him for libel. I'm going to sue you. You're the lies. I'm going to sue you. But instead, what does David do? Big contrast, because I think we can all imagine that Saul would have a different reaction here. Nathan probably would have lost his head if he didn't run out of that place pretty fast. So instead, David goes and says to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord.
Yes.
He doesn't sit there and act out in anger against Nathan and call him a liar. No, instead he admits, you know what? You're right. That's absolutely true. I messed up. I sinned. He was able to admit his fault and humble himself. And that's a big thing, because here you are back then, you're a king. You don't need to go around humbling yourself, admitting that you're wrong.
Yes.
But that's what a good leader does. When you make a mistake, when you mess up, you admit when you're wrong. You humble yourself. You go, you know what? You're right. I messed up. What can I do to fix this?
Amen.
That is part of being a good leader. That's what differentiates. That's why David is looked upon as a good leader, as a great king. It's because, he makes mistakes. He was not perfect. But when confronted with it, he can own up to his shortcomings.
Yes.
And that's the thing that we all have to do in our lives, because there's different types of leadership. You have, right now I was talking about leaderships of the kingdoms, but you got leaders of, countries, you got leaders of cities, towns, you got leaders of colleges, you got leaders of businesses, you have leaders in your friend, you have leaders in your family. There's all different levels of leadership.
Yes.
There's a meme out there I see every now and then on Facebook, whatever, and it likes to talk about the difference. It shows you an example of the difference between a boss and a leader. And the boss, it shows you just sitting on top of the mountain, and he's just sitting on top of the mountain, not doing anything. Whereas the leader is down there reaching down and helping other people up.
Yes.
It's helping pull other people up. And Jesus Christ, who is our King of Kings,
Yes.
who is our true leader and our perfect leader, he's there. He wants to lift us up. He is perfect. He's not going to make any mistakes like we will. He's going to lift you up. He's sitting there lifting you up. That's why he's got a table set for us to go and sit with him and partake with him, to sit at his table and partake of his feast, to inherit his inheritance, be part of the family.
Yes.
So he's looking to pull us up as a good leader. So he wants us to be there. In 1 Timothy chapter 5, verses 8, there's a little scripture I like. But if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. One of the first places you need to start as being a leader is you need to be a leader in your family. And you need to be taking care of them and providing them. But there's a lot of things. It's not just money and providing them. there's skills, there's life lessons, the core values that you have to be providing to your family, that you need to be instilling in your family members to help them out. Saul and David had some problems there with that. And David in particular, he had an outright insurrection by his family. His son Absalom literally rose up against him. And as Nathan predicted there, he actually took the 10 concubines that David had left behind in the palace, set up a tent in the palace, and he slept with them, which cemented the fact that basically they were not going to reconcile, that this was going to go down, and people in Israel had to pick a side, either David or his son. So there were some issues there that David had, because although he was a great leader for the nation of Israel, he had issues with his own family, with properly leading his family, about raising his children in the right way. So there's different levels of leadership there. You want to try to be looking at all the different levels of leadership, whatever, because you may be leading up here well, but you also need to be making sure you're leading here too, depending on what you have in your life. So are you being a good friend? Are you leading your friends? Are you uplifting your friends by your actions? And when you make a mistake, do you own up to it to your friends? You're like, hey, you know what? I was wrong here. Because when you own up, when you humble yourself, there's something about that that's inspiring, whatever.
Yes.
Because it's too often in this world that we want to try to cover up our mistakes. We want to hide from them. We want to bury them. And we'll call somebody else a liar and stuff like that. It's very powerful when you actually own up to those mistakes.
Yes.
And you're being truthful about it. Hey, you know what? You're right. I messed up. What can I do to fix this? It's just something there's very godly about that.
Yes.
And it's very uplifting to other people when you see that. And you see, yes, you know what? You made a mistake, but we can lift them up from there. So it's leadership is a very challenging area. There's many facets to that.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, part of it is your walk too. So you have to be walking. So David usually was walking with God. Some of the times he stepped off the path there with Bathsheba. But when he got told out, and hey, look, you stepped off the path, dude.
Yes.
You could have picked any other woman over there, anybody else in the capital, you could have picked to go and, take as your wife, basically. But no, you took this married woman here. So when he got reminded that he stepped off the path of his walk with God, he was like, oh, you're right. And he stepped back, and he started walking back with God.
Yes.
And that's what you have to do in your life. You have to keep praying, keep talking with God. And letting him speak to you so that you're aware of when you step off the path. And you go, oh, you are right. I stopped walking with you. I am so sorry. I made a mistake. Don't be afraid to humble yourself. If David, a king of Israel, can humble himself, there's no reason why we can't humble ourselves too. Unless somebody else in here is the king of Israel. I'm not sure. But or maybe Wakanda. If he can go and do that, there's no reason why we can't humble ourselves and get ourselves right with God. So don't be afraid when somebody comes and gives you an honest assessment about something. Don't act out rashly or harsh to them. Think about that and pray about it. What, are they right? Did I really stop walking with God? Did I diverge off the path here? And if so, humble yourself. Ask for forgiveness. Get back on that path. Start talking back to him. Because God wants to pull you up. He wants you to sit at his table with him.
Yes.
And you can only do that if you come with him. He's not going to pull you up there against your will. So you got to walk with him, and he will let you sit at his table. You'll be able to sit at his table, sit at his right hand, and take part of the inheritance.
Amen.
So, just want a little prayer. Good Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name, Lord. I thank you, Lord, for giving us wisdom and insight, Lord. I thank you, Lord, for helping us not be rash with our decisions, Lord, that we make them wisely and with your counsel, Lord. And when we do make an ungodly decision, Lord, or an unwise decision, Lord, I ask that you give us people in our lives, Lord, that you correct us, Lord, and remind us of the correct path that we need to be on, Lord. I thank you, Lord. I thank you, Lord, for giving us wisdom so that we don't act irrationally when our bosses give us bad decisions, that we act out of character, Lord.
Yes, Lord.
Or when our leaders make bad decisions, Lord, that we act out of character, Lord. For we know that even if it's an unwise decision, we still need to follow along with it, Lord, so long as it's not ungodly, Lord. But that we also have the wisdom to try to influence and try to inspire our fellow leaders and our fellow man, Lord, around us by making wise and godly decisions, Lord. I thank you, Lord, for letting our leaders make wise and godly decisions, Lord. Thank you for lifting them up, Lord. I thank you, Lord, for letting all leaders in all areas, Lord, leaders of business, Lord, leaders of families, Lord, leaders in friendships, Lord.
Yes.
Lord, I thank you for giving all of them wisdom, Lord, so they may make wise and godly decisions in all those relationships, Lord. So they continue to lift each one of us up, Lord, as we get closer and closer to you, Lord. So we can be sitting at your table, Lord. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord, for your inspiration, Lord. Thank you for divine favor and blessings upon all of us, Lord. In the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, amen.
Amen. Hallelujah. Let's give God praise. Hallelujah.